There is a quiet question in the human soul that most people never voice. Why do some live largely friendless, drifting at the edge of social circles, not entirely lonely but never fully known? Carl Jung would say this question is not simply social, it is existential. It points toward how a person relates to themselves, how they hold their shadow, and how they move through the world with their particular pattern of longing and defense. In this video, we will explore, with measured calm and clinical curiosity, the psychology behind people who have few or no friends. We will not reduce the topic to a single cause. Instead, we will trace interwoven threads: temperament, attachment history, cultural forces, the role of the persona, the shadow's influence, and the way modern life reshapes social capacities. We will do this in the spirit of Jung, seeking depth rather than quick remedies, and meaning rather than judgment. To begin, note an immediate truth. Having few friends does not equal pathology. Many individuals prefer solitude. Some are intentionally solitary and internally rich. The question this work addresses is the psychological architecture underlying those who desire connection but repeatedly fail to sustain it. Why does proximity not become intimacy for them? Why do attempts at closeness fray? Why does the social world remain, for many, an offering of distance rather than belonging? Jung offers crucial concepts for understanding this dynamic. The persona, the mask one wears in public, is the adaptive front. It protects the inner life, it negotiates belonging, and it often secures role-based acceptance. The shadow contains disowned qualities, fears, and impulses, and the process of individuation concerns how these parts are integrated. When the mask is rigid and the shadow vast, relationships suffer. Either the self is hidden behind a persona that never reveals vulnerability, or the shadow projects unwelcome features onto others, provoking rejection. Both endings leave the person friendless in practice, if not in choice. In the chapters ahead, we will examine temperamental predispositions such as introversion and high sensitivity, developmental histories such as attachment wounds and social trauma, the social mechanisms like stigma and modern distraction, the intrapsychic life of projection and idealization, and finally, the path forward, practices that invite repair, belonging, and an authentic social life that is neither performative nor fearful. Chapter 1. Temperament and the quieted social self. Some people are born with nervous systems calibrated to depth rather than breadth. Jung called attention to the differences among souls. Today we might name them introversion, high sensitivity, or simply a low threshold for social stimulation. For these individuals, large gatherings drain energy, small talk feels shallow. The pace of casual social bonding feels like a match meant for kindling rather than a log for deep warmth. Temperament explains why some prefer a handful of close connections while others choose many. But temperament alone does not answer why a person who desires friendship remains isolated. The interplay with early relational history matters. A child with a hypersensitive temperament who experienced inconsistent caregiving may internalize unpredictability as threat. They may then avoid reaching out to others to prevent disappointment. This avoidance over time becomes a pattern endorsed by the nervous system. Distance equals safety. Another temperamental factor is sensory processing. Those who notice details, facial microexpressions, tonal shifts, subtle cues, may find social interactions exhausting because they process the implicit world more intensely. Nuanced perception becomes a burden when the social environment prizes speed and emotional economy. The result can be confusion. Others perceive withdrawal as aloofness or coldness. The highly sensitive person withdraws further to soothe the over-aroused system. It's essential to remember that temperament is not moral, it is descriptive, but it does shape opportunity. In cultures that reward extroversion, a temperamental inclination towards solitude can easily be pathologized or marginalized. Jung would say that honoring the soul's natural tempo is part of individuation, but the psychic cost of misattunement to cultural expectations frequently produces the very social isolation some temperaments would not have chosen if the world were different. Chapter 2. Attachment histories and the architecture of intimacy. Attachment theory bridges childhood and adult social life. The patterns formed in early caregiver relationships, secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized, create relational templates that unfold across the lifespan. Jung's clinical sensibility aligns with this. Early relational imprints form archetypal shapes that the ego reenacts unconsciously. Those with avoidant attachment learned that closeness was unpredictable or unavailable, so they developed self-sufficiency as a protective strategy. They learned to downplay dependence because dependence once led to pain. In adulthood, this translates to an emotional reserve that others misread as coldness. Paradoxically, the avoidants still desire connection, but they sabotage intimacy before it can become real. Their persona of independence becomes a wall dividing them from friends who want depth. Anxious attachment produces a different dynamic: intense pursuit, fear of abandonment, and a hypervigilance to relational signals. People with anxious tendencies may appear clingy or demanding to those who prefer more autonomy. Their relational strategies often provoke distance, which then reinforces anxious expectations. This loop can shrink a social world until the person is left with few reliable companions. Disorganized attachment, often rooted in traumatic caregiving, creates erratic and confusing signals. Such individuals may oscillate between yearning and fright, seeking closeness and then reacting defensively when it occurs. For observers, this behavior is bewildering. For the person, it feels shaming and isolating. Jungians note that the wounded child inside acts with its own logic, and until that child is soothed, adult relationships often mirror chaotic patterns rather than stable friendship. Importantly, secure attachment is not the only path to friendship. Reparative experiences, therapeutic containment, and corrective relationships can rewire the template. Jung emphasized that change is possible through conscious work. The person who understands their attachment script can begin to choose differently. This is the hopeful message. Patterns are not destiny, but they require awareness and practice to change. Chapter 3. Persona, Projection, and the Shadow at Work in Social Life. Jung's most useful clinical lenses in this work are the persona and projection. The persona is the social mask. It smooths interactions, it adapts to norms, and it performs roles. But problems arise when the persona becomes rigid, when the mask never comes off. Friendship thrives on vulnerability. If a person only presents competence, irony, or a charming surface, others rarely experience the material of the soul that invites intimacy. Projection is the unconscious move of attributing one's own disowned traits to others. A person who fears their own neediness may accuse friends of being needy. A person who hides anger may perceive irritability in every companion. Projection creates friction. It misreads neutral situations as validation for inner fears. The result is a social world in which misunderstandings proliferate and withdrawal appears safer than risking another projected hit. The shadow is the repository of what we deny. When the shadow contains loneliness, envy, or shame, the person may unconsciously avoid friends who could reflect these painful contents, or they may unconsciously attract relationships that mirror the shadow's themes, repeating patterns that keep them from stable friendship. For example, if the shadow holds fear of being unlovable, the person may unconsciously choose companions who are unreliable, thereby reproducing the original fear. Culturally, the persona ideal can be shaped by social media and status narratives. When authenticity is commodified, vulnerability can feel dangerous. Individuals then tighten their masks to fit branded identities. Instead of true sharing, we get curated selfhood, a series of highlight reels. Jung would call this an age of collective persona inflation, where authentic relational depth becomes rare and transactional connection becomes abundant. For those who long for friendship, the proliferation of curated masks complicates every attempt at real bonding. Chapter 4. Modern Forces, Technology, Isolation, and the Erosion of Social Skills. In the present age, environmental pressures compound intrapsychic dynamics. Technology reshapes attention, communication, and expectation. Online interaction can create an illusion of connection while eroding the skills necessary for intimate friendship, reading tone, sitting through awkwardness, repairing minor slights. Digital mediums favor rapid judgments, short emotional arcs, and performative communication. Urbanization and mobility also matter. Modern lives are geographically fluid. People move cities for work, leaving behind extended networks. Making new friends as an adult requires effort, time, and social risk. Many adults lead lives that leave little space for cultivating relationships, long work hours, caregiving responsibilities, and fragmented schedules. For those already carrying temperamental or attachment vulnerabilities, these structural barriers make friendship improbable rather than impossible. Stigma plays a hidden role. When someone is seen as odd, anxious, or different, social groups often ostracize them. Cultural narratives about success, extroversion, or productivity implicitly punish those who do not conform. For example, workplaces that reward networking and self-promotion can marginalize the thoughtful introvert who brings deep insight but less social theater. Stigma can be explicit or subtle, but its social force isolates. Finally, consider the modern valorization of independence. Western culture often celebrates self-reliance to the point of devaluing interdependence. The message becomes, if you have few friends, be proud. You are strong. That rhetoric can be protective, but it can also excuse disconnection. For those who yearn for friendship, the cultural story of independence can become yet another mask to adopt, a way to avoid the vulnerability required for deep connection. Chapter 5. The Path Forward, Repair, Practice, and the Art of Belonging. The final question is both practical and soul-deep. How does one move from social isolation into meaningful friendship? Jungian psychology offers both inner work and social practice. First, internal repair. Recognize the narratives that govern your social life. Identify attachment wounds and, if possible, engage in corrective relational experiences through therapy, support groups, or deliberately chosen relationships that provide repair. Naming projections and owning shadow material reduces the unconscious sabotage of intimacy. This is painful work and it requires patience, but it is transformative. Second, practice vulnerability in small, steady doses. Authenticity does not mean confessing everything at once. It means allowing the mask to relax in safe contexts. A trusted coworker, a small group, a therapy circle, sharing a small fear, asking for a tiny favor, revealing a private preference. These are the scaffolding of trust. Over time, small disclosures accumulate into deep knowing. Third, cultivate environments that support deep connection. Friendship is often structural. It grows where rituals, shared practices, and recurring time exist. Join clubs, workshops, volunteer groups, or classes aligned with your values. These contexts reduce the anxiety of initiating contact because they provide repeated opportunities to show up, be seen, and be known. Regularity builds trust. Fourth, tend to social skills gently. Listening, asking open questions, and offering consistent small acts of care are relational muscles that can be strengthened. Work on curiosity rather than performance. Practice staying present rather than rehearsing responses. Learning to repair after social missteps, apologizing, clarifying, showing up again, builds resilience in relationships. Fifth, practice ethical generosity. Friendship grows in reciprocity. Giving time, attention, and presence without immediate return fosters bonds. Yet generosity must be bounded. It requires reciprocity and self-respect. The wise friend knows when to provide and when to protect their own limits. Boundaries preserve the integrity of connection. Finally, embrace solitude as a companion, not a sentence. The aim is not to eliminate solitude, but to transform it into a source of strength. The person who is comfortable alone brings fullness to friendship rather than neediness. Jung would suggest that the inner companion, the individuated self, is the most attractive presence in any relationship. When the self is whole, friendships become invitations rather than salvations. In closing, remember that having few or no friends is not always indication of pathology, nor is it a fixed identity. It is often the outcome of a history, a temperament, cultural forces, and psychological patterns. With awareness, patience, and practice, the social world can be regained. Jung's wisdom invites us to the slow work of integration, to meet the shadow, to lower the mask, and to allow the tender process of genuine friendship to unfold. Friendship is the echo of inner wholeness. Build the inner life, and the outer life will more likely answer. The journey is not swift. It is an education of the heart, but it is also the most human work we will ever do.